Good afternoon. This is day 6 of the New York State Craft Brewers Conference. Today is presented by William A. Smith & Son Insurance Agency, a great sponsor of the NYSBA. And you have entered the session called From Surviving to Thriving in 2021. We have two great presenters here today. I'm really excited. We have Erik Coleman of Trocaire College and Jim Now of Ellicottville Brewing Company. And basically, this session is going to answer all of your questions, every single one of them, about how you go from surviving to thriving, how you go from kind of stable, putting out fire mode to actually advancing your business, your brewery forward in the coming months here as we move out of COVID times. So Jim is going to share his screen. He's got a really good presentation for you. And I'm sure you'll have questions, so feel free to put them in chat. Keep your microphones on mute unless you're called on to ask a question. Keep your camera on. It's nice to be able to see people's faces and connect during this time. So I will turn it over to you, Jim, to start your presentation whenever you're ready.
Thanks, Megan. And some of you may also know me from my job at US Foods as a restaurant operations consultant for Western New York. I think I've dealt with a few of the owners there along those lines. So today, Erik and I just put together a little presentation that's kind of go over, like it says, right, from surviving to thriving in 2021. I think last year was pretty much survival mode by the middle of March, and just trying to get through it and do whatever we can to get beyond the pandemic. And so, you know, we're looking at some things. Obviously, we're not going to be completely out of the woods until all the vaccines and herd immunity and everything else like that. But there's certainly some things we can do going forward in 2021 to make ourselves more successful and put 2020 in the rearview mirror. So quickly kind of go over an agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about the current landscape. Then we'll also talk about COVID relief. I know this was covered in a different webinar, and I did sit in on that. Not going to duplicate a lot, just going to kind of, you know, hit the highlights and then talk about some strategies around you know, what you want to do with that COVID relief. In my job at US Foods, that is all I've been doing for the last 11 months, is consulting with our customers on trying to get them as much money as possible. And, you know, anything that we can do to get you all as much relief as you possibly can, that's probably one of the easiest ways to survive. So we'll spend a couple slides on that. Erik's going to go into pivoting your business and things that we want to do to take advantage of what the landscape is going to look like in 2021. We'll talk a little bit about cheap labor, and then a reinvestment in your business. So with that, oh, and if you have questions, go ahead, feel free to put them into chat. I don't know, Erik, are you going to monitor chat, or Megan, one of the two, and we can put them in there?
Megan, if we could have you monitor the chat.
Absolutely.
And then, you can throw them up as they come up there. You know, we can handle a couple per each slide, and then, you know, if there are more than that, you never know. We can adjust and, you know, hit all of those at the end of the presentation.
Yep, sounds good. So let's hop right into it. You know, just some highlights. This isn't everything in the current landscape. This is just top of mind things that really are impacting you all as brewery, brew pub, you know, owners out there. Obviously, we're still on indoor occupancy restrictions. Right now, we're only at a 50% capacity. There are obviously, if you're paying attention, there's lawsuits out there about when we can be open, what can we open inside, what can we not, orange zones, everything else like that. But there's nowhere in the state right now that doesn't have an occupancy restriction. That's going to be really important when we talk about COVID relief a little bit later on. And I'm going to be honest, this is just my view. I don't have a crystal ball, but I struggle to see us get back to 100% occupancy and, you know, unfettered hours of operation and everything else like that. So really, we need to take that into consideration. On the flip side, we have had some easing of the rules by the State Liquor Authority because of the pandemic, because of the unique circumstances and everything else like that. There's some things we can do right now that we couldn't do before, such as expanding your on-premise license where you can actually do this, and even moving out into the streets and into parking lots in some instances. So there's a lot of flexibility with that. Obviously, summer's coming, which means more beer sales. That's going to be a great kick in or shot in the arm for us. So hopefully, you know, we want to take that into consideration as we're looking for trying to thrive in 2021. A lot of it's going to revolve around what we're doing for that summer business, both on premise and off premise, and how we're doing that. Obviously, there's been increased package consumption, right? People aren't going to the bars. People aren't I'm preaching to the choir. I can only imagine there's way more stuff going into cans and bottles and everything else like that than there is going into draft. And so, you know, we want to take that into consideration and take advantage of that as it's happening this year. Obviously, you don't need to talk about the aluminum shortage that is out there. I did get to catch one of the presentations, and it sounded like it's not going to be too terribly bad. I've heard mixed things, but that's just obviously something to keep in mind as you're planning out your 2021. And then there is a lot of COVID relief money out there, and it's really, really important. I don't know any other way to thrive and not just survive other than getting, you know, the free stimulus and relief money that's out there. So with that, let's hop right into it. The biggest change that happened, and the thing that I will say it's the least known, but it's the most misunderstood, is the employee retention tax credit. That existed last year. It was passed in the CARES Act with the PPP, and PPP and the idle loans got all of the attention. The employee retention tax credit got put to the background, and it really wasn't talked a lot about. And then this new legislation came in at the end of 2020, signed into law in very early 2021, and that extended and expanded that tax credit into 2021. It is the single largest tax credit in the history of the United States. That is how much money is out there. There is a tremendous, I don't believe that Congress knew how much money they were giving away through this tax credit, but there's a lot of money out there. The big thing that changed, where a lot of the misunderstanding is, and where we have a lot of accountants maybe not communicating the most accurate information, is that you can now take a PPP and the employee retention tax credit in the same year. So you can't double dip on your payroll. You can't use your payroll for PPP forgiveness, and you can't use your payroll, that same payroll, for the employee retention tax credit. But when you're spending payroll dollars, you can decide in which direction you want to use those. Last year, if you were driving down the road, you had to decide, hey, am I going to take the tax credit or am I going to take the PPP? And most people took the PPP. The PPP is the much richer benefit. It's tax-free. It's dollar for dollar forgiveness. There's always get your PPP. But when you have payroll and you're not using it for PPP forgiveness, let's put that payroll at the employee retention tax credit and get something more with that. This is going to stay at a very high level, folks. If you have additional follow-up questions, put them in the chat. We'll sit here, we'll answer them. Like I said, I spend probably 11 to 12 consults a day with customers, mostly restaurants, but some brew pubs and breweries, you know, trying to explain this and get them as much relief as possible. The way that I see a lot of, especially if you have a tap room or you have anywhere where you have occupancy where customers are coming in and visiting you, the way that I see a lot of you all qualifying for this is through a partial suspension of your operations. The IRS tax code, it gives some examples. One of the last examples is the restriction of inside capacity due to social distancing rules. You're not able to do it at full capacity. Even if you're doing takeout, even if you're doing delivery, even if you've expanded out onto the parking lot where you never were before, if you're partially suspended, you can qualify for this tax credit. And that's the way I see a lot of people. There's also a revenue reduction clause in there. You may qualify that way too, but the partial suspension is going to get you you qualified for this benefit. There is an impact on your PPP forgiveness. So for those of you that went out and got a PPP loan, hopefully you haven't submitted for that forgiveness yet. You have up to 10 months from the end of your covered period. So the absolute soonest you would need to have that forgiveness in is 1 year, a little bit less, a few days less than 1 year from the date that money hit your bank account. But your PPP and your PPP forgiveness can impact the amount of employee retention tax credit you get. You want to use these things in coordination with each other to maximize the amount of money that you're getting. If that wasn't complicated, and that was a 100,000 foot level, if that wasn't complicated enough for you, because it is, the one thing I'll say is you better have a good accountant, preferably a CPA. They are worth their weight in gold. I had a consultation with a customer who's not a brewery today, but through my day job. This individual applied for the PPP forgiveness. It was close to $500,000. They used all payroll. They could have done it differently, and they left upwards of $100,000 of initial employee retention tax credit on the table because they didn't optimize the PPP with the ERTC. So it's complicated. If they would have reached out to their accountant and had a good accountant, they could have $100,000 more in credit coming back to them. I'm not going to go into a lot of details. We all know there was a first round of PPP out there. Like I said, forgiveness applications are not due until 10 months after the end of the covered period. And the shortest covered period you could have is 8 weeks. So 10 months and 8 weeks is just shy of a year. So you have at least just shy of a year. Most of you will probably take 24 weeks, but know that there's not necessarily a very quick it's not due yesterday or you're not overdue or anything else like that. Second round of PPP to qualify, you had to have a quarter where you were down 25% or more. Some of you will have that. Some of you will not have that. If you don't, the ERTC is going to be a lot more valuable to you. Notice I didn't even talk about what it is, the ERTC. It's a tax credit coming back to you, but it could be anywhere from 50 to 70% of your wages and salaries coming back to you in the form of a credit, the ones that are actually qualified for it. For those of you that are getting a PPP, and I have run into this, so some of the brew pubs may not be coded as manufacturing and brewing, and they may be coded with a hospitality code and NAICS code 72, especially if you're more restaurant focused, but you're making your own beer under more of a brew pub scenario. Just from that code alone, that will get you 40% more on your second PPP. You know, brewery A could be coded as a brewery. Brewery B could be coded as a NAICS code 72 restaurant hospitality. Brewery B is going to get more PPP money than brewery A, all things being equal, just because of that code. No, you cannot go back and change that. It's what you selected when you did it. Also, the economic injury disaster loan is out there, the EIDL. This came with a grant. It's really, this is more about, this is a loan. It's a really good loan. It's a 30-year, 3.75%. It's almost like a mortgage. Every $1,000 that you spend and borrow and don't pay back, it's going to cost you $5 a month for that $1,000 for the next 30 years. So it's really good with cash flow, but understand it is a loan. You're going to have to pay it back eventually. It's going to be on your balance sheets, and you have some restrictions on what you can use this loan on. So again, making sure you have a good accountant is really going to help here. And then I'll leave it with this. There is more relief on the way. There is a $25 billion of the $1.9 trillion that's going. I think it just went through the House yesterday. There's about $25 billion set aside for restaurants and breweries and brew pubs. It explicitly lists that all out there. It's not a lot of money. But there is some, it's basically going to be a grant. They're going to look at your 2019 revenue minus your 2020 revenue minus your 2 PPPs and give you that amount as a grant. There's some money earmarked for folks who did under $500,000 in revenue in 2019. And also minority owned, veteran owned, and women owned businesses are going to be at the front of the line for getting this money before it runs out. We do think it probably will go quick. So if you're not under $500,000 or you're not minority owned, women owned, or veteran owned, you're going to want to pay close attention to this, because just like the EIDL and the PPP, we expect the money to go pretty quick. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Erik to talk about pivoting your business.
All righty. For all of you who know me, I did have the opportunity, and it was wonderful to present with Hutch on the Trocaire side of the collegiate aspects of what I do, but Beer by Coleman do a lot of consultative work. And one of the things where, like Jim was saying, the PPP and the EIDL and now the economic tax credit, huge, because they are what you're dealing with first and foremost, and what's going to be able to bring in a lot of that revenue. But now is as important a time as ever to really look internally and seeing how, in addition to getting as much bang for your buck from all of that, and how can we increase revenue sales going into the warmer months, getting lean, getting efficient internally. First things first, food. The reason I bring this up, because we all know that you all had to have some food component as you're serving alcohol. Here in Western New York, we had a lot of people pivot. I know in other parts of the state, some were, some won't. As I was learning, sitting in on the happy hours that we had at the spring and going into the summer, the Paul and team were awesome enough to have. But it's still something that, even though we're now in 2021, some people are not where they want to be. I just had a conversation with a brewing company down in the New York City area. Their food is very simple. They didn't want to scale up their kitchen because space was a huge issue, and then what they're able to do. But fortunately, they're able to hit a park area that was divvied for some of the hospitality restaurants, and including themselves, near where they're at, and now they're scrambling to try to figure out for food. I was able to partner them up with another food vendor where they made food, but it was more to go, and it was like they actually were making charcuterie, as this particular example, smaller scale, travel, well to travel charcuterie boards and things of the like, and I was able to partner them up, so therefore they can retain this business's food. It's one hand washing the other. You're getting the food you need without having to scale up your kitchen, having extra expensive than worrying about chefs and cooks or anything like that. And the other business was able to win-win, and it was able to create those opportunities, whereas we all know the more that you can get in somebody's belly, the longer they're going to stay and drink your beverages, and the higher the tab that's going to be able to go. So food is huge. If you are doing food and you do have some kind of a kitchen set up, be it you just have a cauldron or two to do soups and a panini press, or you have a full-blown kitchen, what are you doing and how did you pivot if you have it in your menu? Are you right now being able to scale it down in a sense of you can repurpose food items? Chicken is always the easiest example, and I know Jim can chime in on this with, you know, operations as well as the use food end of things. You know, being able to use a food item in multiple facets will make best use of the product you're having, so you're not having a lot of waste. You're really minimizing the waste. Also, does your food travel? Are you making something that the minute it goes out the door, it's going to get from point A to point B, not going to look sloppy, slide all over the place or whatever? Is it something that can travel? And then C, are you also tackling family style portions? Are you not just offering X, Y, and Z? Are you offering something that can be like a family meal to go? Is we're coming out of this and we're starting to open up a little bit. People are still thinking about that. And those are some of the things that you want to do with regards to food. Before I move on to the outdoor seating, Jim, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that's good. One of the bullets we have later on is about the holidays and events and putting those meal kits together. You know, we got St. Patrick's Day coming up. That's a huge beer drinking day. Are we using food to leverage our beer sales if we have them? You know, I think that's always great to put together some packages and just try to increase the check size with both together.
Yep. So if you have any questions on that, you know, once again, we can talk about that at the end. Increasing outdoor seating capacity. A lot of people have really maximized, pushed, utilized the sidewalks, the parking spaces, and things like that. I know through some of the different Zooms that we had, Stefan has been able to come in and really working to expand your premise with the New York State Liquor Authority and making sure you're sanctioning every possible area that you can with, depending upon how you're licensed, to get as much space as possible. Also, physical expansions using PPP money can also come into play to really help maximize what space you can have access to and how you're utilizing that space. Another thing that, if you have the opportunity, depending upon where you're out inside of the state, is it's a little more legwork, but doing like pop-ups in parks. Do you have a communal space that can be an area like an outdoor park in your city or some other space where you can set up a jockey box, your 10 by 10, and offer some food to go or some beer to go for people? Those, I know some of the people who were doing those last year in the West New York area did pretty well. Some of the people who were doing them in central and downstate were also really able to help maximize that, especially in some of the tighter packed areas. You got to get creative with the space that you have access to, and especially in bigger cities, there's less space to sometimes get into with regards to that. And then the next one we're taking a look at is takeout, delivery, and shipping. Now, there are some temporary revisions to the State Liquor Authority rules with that. Paul and the New York State Brewers Association does a fantastic job. Pay attention to those notices when any one of the teams sends them out, because they are keeping you up to date on what is going on, especially as they are working hard to get some of these things become permanent, keeping some of these extensions going, and then just really making sure you're able to pivot as much as possible. That's phenomenal. So like right now we're instead until March 16th. That still leaves a lot of time on the table to be able to make sure you're taking advantage of that. And then lastly, crawler machines and packaged products. A lot of people are using crawler machines. If you're still doing growlers, fantastic. But if you have the ability to put in something in an aluminum crawler to ship out, that is huge because that will travel a little bit easier. And taking advantage of these opportunities to really get as much as you can out the door, even though we're going to be opening up and you're going to be having a little more revenue internally, being able to pivot and offer some of those crawlers to go, that's a nice option, because they might come in for a drink, bite to eat, they can take some stuff to go, and then that's just one more way to increase your sales. A lot of you are already doing this, so we don't mean to repeat ourselves, but I still have conversations in and through the last several months where people were struggling with it, or they were doing it, but they wanted to leverage it up because the curbside sales are going down, and how to get creative. And we'll talk about that in some of the other slides. But these are some of the things as you're pivoting are going to be really important to going from that, what we were doing in 2021 or 2020 to really take off and do a little bit more and really improve in 2021.
Erik, if I could just add a couple things.
Jump in.
Personally, I bought a crawler machine and it showed up in February right before we shut down. So it was perfect timing. And it's been a lifeline. A couple things with the change in the state liquor authority rules. If you do sell liquor, there is the ability to actually, my guru, my consultant who does it with me says, yeah, you can put it in a crawler as long as you label it. So there's some folks that are actually putting alcohol in a sealed crawler container and then, making sure everything's done correctly. Again, you're going to want to run this by your liquor consultant or by Paul or whoever else and say, is this legal? But it might be a way to sell other things besides the beer you're typically used to selling in that crawler machine. And then the other thing that, I typically consult with restaurants and good craft beer bars and everything else like that is you're not competing against the tap room experience only anymore. You're competing against the grocery store. You're competing against the convenience mart or somebody else who's selling that packaged product of yours to go. You might have to bring the price point down a little bit, especially with crawlers. Can you move the volume and still make a decent profit as opposed to just, you have to just really look at your price point because your competition has changed a little bit. Now that'll go back differently in the summer when we get to a lot more outdoor seating and stuff like that. And maybe you can absorb that. But I know a lot of folks, especially if you were sitting on a lot of beer back in the early spring, you drop the bottom out of the prices of those crawlers or that packaged product so you can move it out before it goes bad. Just don't forget about pricing when it comes to that. Next slide, everybody.
Yep. Another one, we've had some phenomenal presentations on social media, web, digital marketing. I just wanted to circle back to this because I had a conversation last month, so I feel as it bears mentioning. Make sure your website's tightened up. I'm not saying you have to have and paying a group a significant amount of money, but you want to make sure when people can search for you, they can pull up your website pretty easily, and they're going to be able to see an up-to-date menu of what you have for food and or more importantly beer, for beer to go, crawlers, or even if they're coming in. Because if you think about it, right now, we have, with the limited space, there's so much you can take in, and there's only so many places that people can go. So I myself, and I know a lot of other people do, I might go to check what's on tap. What is it I'm going to have? Because I'm not going to be able to get out long, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to get in. What do they have? So I know I'm maximizing where I go in my time outside of the home, if I am going outside of the home, or where do I want to get that crawler to go? So really making sure you're visible. It's easy to find, it's easy to pull up, and it's up to date. Reviewing some of the other sites, email marketing. These are ways that as we get into the weeds and we're spinning our wheels to try to, not spinning our wheels, but really working hard to try to make up for the losses and getting creative. Don't forget to go back to some of the ways that work. Anytime somebody signs up for your mug club, or if you haven't, make sure you're creating some kind of a social group, or you do a virtual tasting, you're collecting email addresses. Maybe you have a loyalty program. You may have a mug club, but you can have a loyalty program, which is a little bit different. Another way to generate more potential revenue, capture those emails so you can give email blasts, updating people on new beer releases, because maybe they're not going to your website, but they, oh my gosh, you're releasing that. I didn't know that. And then that might drive more of that revenue into your pockets as you're trying to just get creative to get things outside of there. And then the social media, we don't need to hit on that too much. Just make sure you're capitalizing on that. And a lot of times you might have an employee, especially with the younger generation, who are really good at this. Not everybody's going to be able to help translate that and teach you, but it doesn't hurt to look internally, ask around, or somebody else who might be able to help just give it a second look to make sure you're getting the attention that you want. Jim, anything on that before I move into online ordering?
No, I think it's good.
Cool. And then with online ordering, a lot of people are doing this. Everybody pivoted in 2020, but now more than ever, we know that it's not going away. We have some new normals that we're going to be establishing. And as Jim mentioned earlier, this craziness and chaotic, and I know Paul has talked about that, and we all kind of are aware of this, whether we want to believe it or not. 2021 is still going to be a year of some uncertainty. The way they're talking, this could go into a little bit more, and we will see some form of this always staying around. So the online ordering now more than ever, you want to make sure you have that dialed in. If you're not doing it, why not? Let's look. Who can you reach out to make sure you're doing it through a number of different sources, from your POS system to who you're doing with your food vendors. They can help you really get that set up and dialed in. You want to make sure you have everything accessible, QR codes and the such, to make it accessible. You don't want to give people a reason not to find you, not to order from you, and take it to go when they're ordering online. And that tied right in there with that integration to the existing POS. If it's not, there's a lot of ways to do this. If you don't know, ask. There's a lot of people here in this community that can ask your food distributor, the POS company itself, to really help get that locked in. And then moving into holiday and events. We're going into the warmer weather, but it's still a great time to get creative. Holiday meal kits and combo packages between, you have St. Patrick's Day, as Jim alluded to, because we aren't going to be able to see the big parades. We aren't going to see the massive tents packed in and people go nuts. Maybe you can get creative and offer some kind of a corned beef and cabbage and a few growlers of a stout to go package for those who want to celebrate St. Patrick's Day, but still too nervous to go out. The ways to combo and package other things are phenomenal. We have Memorial Day coming up, 4th of July, the whole outdoor summer picnic scene. There are ways where you can pivot. In addition to people coming into your expanded outdoor dining areas, they can get things to go. And you can market that even a little bit separately. You could say, here's what we have going on in the tap room. But for those who don't, we have this get so many crawlers and X, Y, or Z food package at certain set prices to help pivot that out the door. And that's outdoor only, or that's to go only. And then getting creative with some of the other promotions that you can do for specific events you might be hosting or being a part of, or things that you know are going on inside of your city or township that you can partner up with, just to make sure you're always being present, you're top of mind, and you're able to meet and give the public what they want. Jim, did you want to jump into any of these things?
No, I give a little anecdotal information. You know, I'm over here on the left side, the west side of the state, but I went to school over in Albany, the Capital District, on the east side of the state, and I love drinking good beer. And I'd say one of the silver linings of COVID is that it's a lot easier to get online and go to, let's say, a brewery in the Hudson Valley that I went on vacation there 2 years ago, and I like their beer, you know, and with all due respect, there's great beer throughout the state, but I just want to get some because I haven't been over there in a while. I can get online, and if they've got, I will tell you where I've spent the money. They got a good looking website. I know what inventory they have in there. They make it easy to order. You're not talking to anybody. Boom, boom, you put it in, and then a couple days later, it shows up at your door. I mean, it was a no-brainer for us. We'd spend $300-400 a pop just to get that shipped from one side of the state to there. Because you're going to buy some, you might as well maximize the shipping and buy as much as you can. So I think that's just one end of the extreme of shipping the beer across the strait. But if you have a tap room and you're doing food in your local area, you know, you want to compete with these restaurants. You know, you have a competitive advantage. You have really good beer on tap. You can send it to go, and you can put it in a crawler or packaged or something else like that. Brewery A and Brewery B do the same thing. They have the exact same product, same quality, everything else like that. But Brewery A makes it very easy for you to do it. And Brewery B, you got to pick up the telephone and do that, and give your credit card and everything. Guess what? Especially the young folks and the millennials, they're going to pick A. They don't want to talk to anybody. So really making sure that you've got a good, efficient, easy online ordering program, whether it's shipping it across the state or just getting it in someone's car who comes for curbside pickup, I think is really important. I wanted to circle back. This kind of relates to the PPP stuff. There's a slide in here on cheap labor, and I've been dealing a lot with a lot of the customers that I talk to. It's very applicable to the brewing industry as well. Right now, the federal government is picking up a huge chunk of your labor cost. Typically speaking, everybody, especially if you have any kind of restaurant type facility at your brewery, you're worried about labor. It's the number one line item in most restaurant situations. But right now, between the PPP, which is dollar for dollar, 100% forgiven and tax-free, or the employee retention tax credit, which right now is 70% of the wages and salaries and the tips that you're declaring from your employees, for your employees, the federal government is giving you that money back as a credit. So they're covering the vast majority of your labor costs. And so, you know, historically it was the number one thing that maybe you worried about. Now, labor is not the number one expense that you're worried about right now. So what can you do to optimize the situation where labor is so cheap? First of all, if you ever have a situation where you can make it a W-2 employee instead of a 1099 contractor, you want to think about that. It could be cleaning services in the front of the house. It could be, hey, you know, we contract with this company to do social media, but maybe there's an opportunity to hire someone. It really varies from case to case, but look and see, are there opportunities where you can have someone be a W-2 employee instead of contracting out on a 1099 basis or whatever that may be. It's a good time to tackle those long-term goals. You always wanted to recost your menu. You always wanted to recost all your recipes. You always wanted to, you know, clean up our social media program or get a new website or whatever that is. You know, tackle these long-term goals and spend that labor dollar now, while 70% of it is being picked up by 70+% of it is being picked up by the federal government, instead of a year from now. Because guess what? In a year from now, when this money runs out, you can see that last bullet point. But when the COVID relief stops, labor is going to be your number one problem again. So if you can solve some problems or have to get some focus on some things right now and use that labor dollar now, and you have the cash flow, it's a really great time to take on those long-term goals. You know, typically we might look at situations and go, I don't know if I really want to do that thing. I don't know if I want to do this event or whatever, or I want to do delivery, whatever it may be, because it's going to cost a lot of labor. No, things that we can do that are labor intensive now, but that will increase that top line, as long as we can make the margin on the cost of goods, let's do it, because that labor is substantially cheaper. One of the biggest problems out there is unemployment is an extra $300 on top of whatever else they're getting on unemployment. You really got to pay people right now to get them to work. There are people who will work. I know the struggle, I hear it every day, but there are people who will work. They want to be paid well, and it's easier now to pay them a little bit more, because so much of your wages and salaries are being subsidized by this federal money. So it's just something to keep, you know, it's sort of a strategy or top of mind, but do not forget that last bullet point. You know, we have gone from labor is really important, and we're thinking about it, to, you know, we were nervous. We didn't even know we could take this tax credit, but now when you look at it, it's so cheap. It's going to go back to being really expensive again. Strike while the iron is hot and do some things with that free labor that's coming in from the federal government. I'll pass it back over. Oh, actually, this one's me. On the actual use of those dollars, I mean, now's the time for key employee acquisition, right? I mean, if you're looking to bring on a new person, or you're looking to, you know, you have an employee that you really need to fill this role, here's an opportunity to maybe pay a little bit more and get them into the system and get it covered now. And then retention as well, right? I mean, good employees, they know that there's money to be had. And so, you know, using a little bit of that additional money to keep them retained is a really good thing. It's good. Think of it this way. If you're going to pay an employee a bonus, pay them this year. Right now, this tax credit is only for the first 2 quarters. We expect it to get extended into the last 2, but pay them that bonus now when you're getting 70% of it back, versus paying them something or some bonus or anything else like that in the future. It's really important to think about that. Unfortunately, there will be breweries and restaurants that are going to close because of COVID. Even with all this free money, even with everything else, it's going to happen. So what does that mean? Well, to reinvest in your business, there's going to be a lot of used equipment out there, without a doubt. A lot of used tons of used restaurant equipment. I would imagine you were going to have the same situation with brewery equipment. So it might be an opportunity for you to pick up things that maybe you're going to get them for pennies on the dollar or quarters on the dollar, whatever that may be. Obviously, there's the ability to expand into new locations and markets. I do have a couple of brewery customers that I work with at US Foods, and I know they are opening up second locations because places have closed. Opportunities have shown up, and they're actually moving in and gonna, you know, they've used their money wisely, and they're going to start a new branch or a new location or make some more beer or whatever that is. It might be an opportunity for you to look at a new market, right? You may have done really well in this market, and now you're looking to expand and go into a different market and get a bigger footprint. Just know that there are going to be some of those opportunities out here. And I will tell you this, don't think that the chains aren't doing this. The chains are absolutely doing this. The large restaurant chains are going to pick up a lot of locations where smaller restaurants will go out of business. And then, you know, how else can you reinvest in your business? I think Erik talked about it. We have to adjust to the new normal, right? Like, who knows what's going to happen with capacity? But even if it's not a legal mandate for capacity, it's people's perceptions, right? There's the legality of it, but then there's the perceptions of it. You need to think about, how am I doing my seating right now? Am I going to expand it? Am I going to have a little bit more space than I used to? Am I going to look at different ventilation systems? You know, I've seen a lot of folks take out those windows and put in those garage doors. I know it's super trendy and everything else like that prior to this, but there's a lot of places that are doing it just because they want the perception and they do want the fresh air coming in. So is that something where you're going to reinvest into that? Are you looking at the flow of your establishment, right? Are we having people come in one way and then another way? Hey, we're doing really well with to-go, and we think to-go is going to stick around for us. Do we need to have a second door or a place where we can actually funnel out that to-go business? Obviously, patios, heaters, they're all in demand. Can we expand our patio? You know, are we going to make some infrastructure changes so that we can accommodate more outdoor volume? I do believe that you're going to see a shift where people are going to be willing to be outdoors even more, even in harsher conditions, because they feel safer outdoors. And, you know, are we taking advantage of that, you know, as much as possible? But just thinking about those things as you reinvest in your business. And then I'll pass it over to Erik.
Yeah, and also kind of knowing that before we open up, because we're in New York State, the weather is still a little cool today, but in another month, 2 months, people are going to want to be outside more and more and more while we have this federal funding that's coming through, as Jim's stated. Let's take advantage of it. And in addition to tightening up the ship and looking internally, these are some things that you can do that if you haven't done, definitely do. And if not, add it. And if you already have it, how do you improve? How do you just add to it, make it a little bit better? Yeah, Chris, exactly. So improved efficiencies. Take a look at your, we talked about the food, your liquor as well, your labor. Like maybe this is the time that you can, now more than ever, especially if you've been open for a little bit, you can change what you're having without getting the customers too upset. You can, hey, we were never really moving this much. If you're selling liquor out of your brewery, coming to your tap room, let's scale it back. Or I want to switch around a little bit. I want to go a little more New York State because I'm thinking of shifting to farm brewing. I want to be able to incorporate that. The menus, okay, you know what? We had a pretty expansive menu. I want to shrink it. Or our menu is pretty lean, but now because we've had to add more, we want to expand it, really get those efficiencies in. Reevaluating costs of goods sold. Making sure you're just paying attention is what are your price points? Are they where they need to be? Do you want to maybe add, subtract? Do you want to adjust those? Excuse me. Mission and vision statements. A lot of people will have these, but smaller brewing companies I've seen sometimes don't. To steal from Simon Sinek, what is your why? Making sure if you don't have it, I recommend you kind of establishing now. And now's the time you can as you're reinventing yourself, so to speak. And we've had this shake up. People won't know if you didn't have it or not. They might not remember it, but now's the time to really embed it. Why are you about what you're doing other than just making beer? Because we want to make sure we're making the guests and the customers feel phenomenal. I tell all of my clients, I say this to the brewing school, you don't make beer. I mean, obviously you make beer. You make an experience. With as many brewing companies as we have now in the country and the state, there's a lot of people making some good beer. Even if they only make 1 or 2 of their whole lineup, everybody's doing something, and there's more and more popping up. So now you are selling an experience, be it to go in your tap room or on your patio. And so really tightening a mission and vision statements and having your staff embody that and talk the talk and walk the walk is now more important than ever. You have within your labor the best brand ambassadors you could have. So create that mission and vision. Improving policies and procedures. If you don't have them, maybe establish them. If you've always wanted them, now's the time that you can invest in a little labor, because with the PPP money being out there potentially, add them in there, or at least even creating like one-page worksheets that really streamline stuff. So when people get nuts and people get busy, we all forget. It is human nature to deviate from what you want as your true north. By having something in writing, maybe with pictograms, is a phenomenal way in the brew house, the front of the house, the back of the house, to keep everybody on point. And when your managers are going nuts because everything is going well with your outdoor seating and you're jamming, you always have something that is the basis that you've gone back to, you've retrained your staff on, you've tightened up, and you've rolled out, so everybody's doing what they want. I know a lot of people were working on this with the COVID regulations, then we changed, and then we didn't change, and we changed. Take out what you don't need, make sure you're having what you need, keep your other versions because we don't know what could be down the road. Now really tighten up all of that. Also, getting into the training. Now is the time to take your crack team, the people who have been with you through thick or thin, make sure they have the training they need. If you're a brewing company with a tap room, your staff should be level 1 Cicero. Get them trained, let them be able to understand the knowledge that's going to improve just everything. And if they are fantastic, work on cross-training staff. Once again, I know I deal with this from the brewing school as well as the consulting. If you need a brewer, a part-time brewer, or you want a brewer, somebody wants full-time, you can only give them 20 hours, but maybe they have some culinary skills. Maybe they can bartend. Maybe they can be in marketing. Work on cross-training your staff. Maybe you have a server and a bartender. Make sure they can do both. So therefore, you're not just bringing in a bartender, but all of a sudden you have 2 bartenders on and a couple servers go off. One of those bartenders can do double duty. Make sure everybody knows those positions. Anybody who has any affinity for the culinary skills or anybody who would want to learn it, now's the time to get them in there. We see, because of the incentives to collect off on unemployment there, I know in the Western New York area, there are about 15, 20 people I've had to reach out to me. I had 3 on Friday call me up and say, I want to work and I need people from your hospitality program. Or as a consultant, Eric, help me find somebody. And they're just not there. So now's the time to take a look at who do you have on staff? What are some of their other skill sets? And as you're training them and getting everybody back, circling those wagons again, ask them, talk to your staff. So make sure, yes, there you go. Bartenders make great UPS packers. Work with them to give them extra hours. So therefore, you're maximizing that labor that's getting subsidized to really embed what you want for best practices for your business, because then it's just there, it's embedded. And as we go forth, getting out of 2020 and into the 2021, it's going to become just the new culture. Your culture is going to get solidified, codified, and just everything's going to be just able to go forward a lot more efficient, effective, and hopefully drive up that bottom line for you, as well as increasing sales. Jim, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, just one thing, and then I think we open it up to questions. All these things that Erik talks about here on this, I think they're super important. They cost money because they cost time. Your time is worth money. But you can also hire really smart people and pay them, again, with federally subsidized labor money to get this stuff done. Part of me says, God, I really, training is super, super important. I know as an operator, every once in a while, I'm like, when am I going to find the time to do this training? When am I going to put this all together? It's going to cost time. How do I do it? But now is the opportunity. Dedicate some man hours, woman hours towards having someone put this stuff together and do it, because you're going to do it again at some point. You're going to need to do it. All these things that Erik talked about in this list on this last page are extremely important to your business. They're long-term things, but they do take time. And what a better time to do it than right now, where somebody costs you, if you look at minimum wage or look at $20 an hour, you pay somebody $20 an hour, it's really only costing you about $6 an hour after you get this 70% credit back from the federal government. So really important things. Take the time and the money now to get these things done. I think that's pretty much all we had. We'll open it up to questions. I know that was a lot. It was kind of, all over the place, and we can go back. We can answer PPP questions, tax credit COVID questions. We can answer other pivoting ideas or thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Jim and Erik. Really appreciate all this information. I have just 2 comments based on the content that you have shared. And if anyone has any questions, please add them to chat. The first comment is the NYSBA app, right? New York was the first state in the country to have an app. We have 22,000 subscribers who are very active using the app. So use that as a way of promoting your business, keeping up to date of what you have on tap, what your hours are, whether or not you have outside seating. That's a really great free resource available to you. And then the second thing is use your website for evergreen content, for content that is not necessarily shifting, and then use social media for up-to-the-minute content. 68% of college graduates in the United States are on Facebook. That's a key market of craft beer enthusiasts. So maybe use Facebook to promote upcoming events or to share a release or something. I myself read on a website that a beer was being released this weekend. I went and they said, oh, it's delayed. Well, that wasn't updated on the website. So here I am disappointed. So you want to make sure that you're being consistent with your communication channels and how you're using them as a way of really staying engaged with your audience. So that being said, anyone have 28, Paul says 28,000 are now using the app. See how out of date I was? That was just, my number was from yesterday. So good to stay up to date. So what questions do you have for Erik and Jim? I have some.
I also think one of the things, I sometimes think people underestimate Google. Google is huge. There's a tremendous amount of interstate, I don't know, I forget, inside the state travel, right? Like we have travel bans, we leave the state and everything else like that. So people are moving around and they're going to different places. And I think Facebook is very important. I think your website is your digital front door. It's way more important than the sign that you have on your building or whatever it is. But I think sometimes folks forget the power of Google and the fact that when you're going somewhere, one of the first things everyone does is breweries near me, places to eat near me, craft beer near me. The more that you can show up in those first 3 listings, that's huge. That's the first 3 that show up on a mobile device. Your website needs to look phenomenal on a mobile device because 50% of all searches happen on those. And like something like 75% of people, before they go to a place, they search before they actually go there. So you want that to show up excellent on a mobile device. But as you're traveling, you can be going down the highway and it's like, you know what, we want to eat and we love craft beer. What are the breweries near Utica, New York, right? And then it shows up and you show the ranking and everything else like that. So don't forget about the power of Google. You can also post events. You can actually have posts on Google. I think it sometimes gets a little bit, underutilized or doesn't get the importance. Tripadvisor is another one. I expect a tremendous amount of people still traveling in the state. And maybe we'll have a little bit, but I think we saw a lot more local travel. When you're going to different places and you're looking for suggested things to do you show up on any of those suggested stops? As a brewery, I think you could be a destination as well as a restaurant or something else like that. But responding to those reviews, getting your rankings higher on those, because people look at rankings. Are we doing everything in our power to make those review sites make us show up as well as we do and be consistent across all of those? Like your hours need to be the same everywhere. The more that there's consistency and the more information you have and the better you show up overall, actually that also helps your Google ranking as well too. So I think those are really important to capture that summer tourism. I do think we're going to see, just like we did last year, some pent up energy for people to just really come out and do a lot. They're going to feel safer and they're going to have some pent up energy to want to go out and do these things.
I think we're also seeing merchandise as a way of staying connected, as another revenue source for breweries. I know the NYSBA merchandise program has really increased significantly since COVID started for a myriad of reasons, but because I think people are hungry for something that shows what they're loyal to, what they enjoy, as a way of communicating their own personal brands. So if you have a tap room and you don't have a merchandise program of any kind, you should maybe look into that as a way of helping transition out of COVID. Obviously, there's a little upfront cost, although you can do pre-order sales, which is what we do a lot at the NYSBA. And we've also offered programs for members where we do co-branding, and it's really inexpensive to get in, and so low risk, and can really help advance your brand and generate additional revenue beyond your beer products. Jim.
Anybody have any questions or any wins that you want to share? Anything that you've done to pivot? Love to hear from any of you out there that want to talk and say, here's what we did, here's what we've been able to see help us tackle any of these problems that we've all been dealing with as we've been, moving through this sludge for the last 12, 13 months and able to start getting into what we're hoping to see, getting a little bit more open. Not a problem. One of the things I know that I hear, that's what brought a lot of this up, is just some of the little things, because we've all been forced to really spend so many more hours, a lot of you as the owners and operators, doing more internally because of the reduction of labor, reduction of sales. You get into the weeds a little bit. These are the times to maybe take and figure out, okay, what can I pass off that I'm doing that maybe somebody else can learn how to do to help out, and maximizing those labor dollars that Jim was talking about. So therefore, as you open up more, as the weather gets warm and we're seating and we are busy as heck, you aren't still shouldering all of those burdens that you're currently doing now through the wintertime when you got to stay lean to try to stay open. So it's like, what could be one or two of the three of those things that you could say, somebody else can do this. Maybe it's the GM, maybe there's a bartender who showed aptitude, maybe there's a brewer who showed aptitude, whatever. But who else that you can glean, they can glean the information from you, and you can help pass it off to the left or to the right. So when it comes to line your slammer, you're trying to do an event or more pop-ups in a park or whatever it is, that you aren't going to be bogged down, because for the last year, everybody's been forced to just do more with less. Let's make sure we're ready to go do more and spread that out a little bit, so you're not going to all of a sudden be pulling your hair out through 2021 and have a new load of stresses that you didn't have before, because now you're ramping back up to meet the need, but maybe you weren't ready or positioned in a way where you can really tackle that.
Jim and Eric, I'm curious, have you heard of any breweries who were declined the PPP funds?
I personally haven't. I could see some breweries not having that 25% reduction in any quarter and then not getting that second PPP. I mean, I'm sure that has happened in some instances. There's also some breweries that, you know, probably didn't open before February 15th. You had to be in operations as of February 15th of last year. So, you know, if they didn't have sales prior to that, or maybe the LLC was even formed, or the S Corp, whatever was formed after that, you know, clearly they're not going to get any chance at a PPP. They're not going to get any chance at an economic injury disaster loan. You know, they're not going to have those at their disposal. They still have that tax credit at their disposal, without a doubt. Especially, you know, there's provisions for being down in revenue in that tax credit that that will qualify them. But there's also the suspension. Nothing in the tax credit says you had to be open as of a certain date. So I hope I let it off as the first slide. I hope I reiterated enough. Sometimes I'm too technical and not passionate enough. That tax credit is a ton of money. Right now, it's 70% of salaries and wages up to a maximum of $10,000 per quarter. So it's a maximum of $7,000 per quarter per employee. I mean, that's a tremendous amount of money. We also believe it's going to be, you can apply that 70% to the tips that your customers pay. You pay FICA on them, so we believe it should cover those tips as well. I mean, you pay a server $8 an hour and they make $4 an hour in tips. That's a $25 tip night for them, which is like ridiculously low. They've made $12 an hour. You get 70% of that back. That's $8.40. You're getting $8.40 back while you're paying them $8. So, I mean, there's a lot of money. You got to make sure you qualify. Again, it comes down to having a good accountant and having this exposed to you. But I can tell you personally, and Eric knows this, Eric came down and worked with me a little bit at my establishment. I was super nervous about labor last year and this PPP running out and everything else like that, and concerned about it. But when they flipped the switch and they, you know, all of a sudden the credit's coming back for last year that I didn't even know I was getting it until the beginning of this year. And now I'm either spending PPP money, which was free, or I'm getting 70% back on whatever I'm spending. I've literally had conversations with GMs like, I don't want to be understaffed. I don't want to just spend money like it's going out of style. But I specifically said, get off the floor. I have a job, a full-time job besides owning that. I don't want to work that hard. I want you to just spend your time doing the things that I would do, and you get off that floor. It used to be they had to help people work that floor. Now it's like, get off the floor and labor is cheap. A minimum wage employee costs me next to nothing to have them on the floor. Have them do that, and then you focus on that last slide that Erik talked about. We have revamped our training program. We're putting a new focus on social media and how we're doing that. We're getting all of our emails into our email campaign and everything else like that. These are the things that individual is doing instead of trying to keep us just, chugging along and doing the operations that we're doing. And it was a revelation. I had it talking to the customer, and then immediately went back and said, we got to do this, because that's another way of reinvesting in yourself in 2021 to set yourself up for the future. The things we're doing now, we're going to reap in the busier summer months and into the fall and into 2022 and everything and beyond. So I think that really helps.
Jim, someone had a question.
Tax credit. Yeah, go ahead. I was reading those.
No, please.
The tax credit is only for people who didn't take the PPP. Sorry, I am sure you said that already. That is not correct. That was the case prior to the most recent legislation. Last year, if we had this talk in December, I would have said, you took the PPP, you can't have the tax credit. Then they passed this legislation and they said, no, you can have both now. You can absolutely have both. You could have both in 2020. You can have both in 2021. You just can't, when you're paying an employee and you're paying them wages and salaries, or you're using tips, you can't use that same money and put it at the PPP to give it forgiven and then put it at the tax credit. Every single payroll dollar has a choice. Do I go towards the PPP? Do I go towards the tax credit? And I go towards the PPP first to get that forgiven, because that's better money. That's more benefit to you. But once I've used enough payroll to get that forgiven, 60% of that loan has to be payroll. That's it. If you used 62% on payroll, you used 2% too much and you left some money on the table on the tax credit. Get that 60% forgiven with payroll and then start pushing that payroll at the tax credit. That's why you're going to go back into last year. You're going to amend your 941s, your federal payroll tax filings, because I guarantee you, I know I see a lot of faces on there. You know, you have tap rooms. Those tap rooms are restricted. It is not it is more than just a nominal part of your business. And so you will qualify for this. And not only that, the tax credit just doesn't count for the people working in your tap room. It counts towards your head brewer, counts towards your production manager. Everybody in that organization can get that tax credit. So for those of you out there that are you know, not just small brew pubs or not just larger just production facilities, you know, every single employee, if you can qualify under the rules of the ERTC, and again, get that good accountant, if you can qualify, then every single employee in any facility, in any capacity in your organization will qualify for that tax credit.
Awesome. Really helpful. We have 2 minutes left. Any further questions? All right, it's crystal clear apparently.
Really
Thank
appreciate
you.
you guys tuning in this Monday. Thank you so much. Thank you, Paul and Megan and Chloe, Jen, and everybody at the New York State Association. This has been a phenomenal event, and Ethan, love what's going on here. Grateful to be a part of it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Eric and Jim. Really appreciate the information you shared. And for everyone watching, don't forget, you can check out all the sessions on the New York State Brewers Association YouTube channel. So thank you all. Next session up is Dr. J at 5:30.
Awesome. Cheers.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.